Hi, Clutter Fairy fans. This is the Clutter Fairy Weekly for July 5th, 2022. I'm your co-host, Ed Gumnick, and I'm speaking with Gayle Goddard, professional organizer and owner of the Clutter Fairy in Houston, Texas.
Hi, everybody. The Clutter Fairy Weekly is the webcast and podcast that digs deep into the clutter that piles up between you and the life you want to be living. We explore the habits and behaviors that lead to clutter, and we suggest strategies to slow the accumulation, reduce the collection, and comfortably manage the stuff we decide to keep.
If you're new to our Zoom meeting, we want to let you know that you can share your comments and questions via the chat feature, and I'll try to make sure Gayle gets to them before we move on to another topic. You can also use the raise hand feature to let us know if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment yourself via audio or video. We're also streaming the webcast live on Facebook, so feel free to share your questions and comments there, and I'll relay them to Gayle. We're going to start, as we usually do, by recapping last week's Tittle, which was called Playing Favorites. The assignment was to focus on a favorite or most effective organizing strategy or technique as you work on an organizing project or area of your home. We'd love to hear from our participants live in Zoom and on Facebook who made Tittle progress or who has to report stuckness this week.
Please, who got derailed?
Right? Please let us know in the comments. YouTube viewer and frequent commenter CM had this to share. My all-time favorite technique comes from you, Gayle Goddard, the best clutter expert. Your technique is to clear the floors first, so we do not trip and fall over stuff we dumped or stored on the floor or stairs as we move about trying to declutter. The floor is the largest flat surface in any house, so a lot is dumped there. Shopping bags, Amazon boxes, overflow from tabletops and countertops. So this week, I am going to clear just the floors of one room each day.
Thanks to CM for the kind support. And clearing the floor is definitely an oldie but a goodie. It's one of my all-time favorites, and it makes such a huge difference when you clear out walking paths of all the obstructions that you've added to them. You can never get to something when there's a bunch of stuff on the floor in front of it. It's always a great place to start your declutter journey. And thanks so much for the comment. I appreciate having the claim of your favorite clutter expert. Thanks so much.
Cara reports enjoying Dana K. White's 5 Steps to Decluttering, looking for trash and declutter. She says declutter first. And look, I got unstuck in my office with paper. I think we get lots and lots of people who recommend Dana K. White. So I want to read up. I don't know if she has a book. I know she has a blog or website that is very popular, and maybe do a Dana K. White focus show in the future if that sounds like something that would interest a lot of people.
That'd be great.
Samudra reports bad weather, bad arthritis, bad progress.
Oh,
sorry to hear that.
And we all have those days, so it'll be fine. You can go back to it when you feel a little bit better.
Anya reports my former organizer took a load of clutter off my hands today. What a relief. Love it.
That's exciting. Always good when something goes out the door. Congratulations.
Amanda said Dana K. White has a couple of books, so I will look for those.
Yeah, we got to check that out.
Leela said, I thought I was out of things to declutter that belong to me or I have permission to purge, but I managed to go through the house successfully 3 times with my method of one thing is leaving each room. Ooh. I try to go as fast as I can, like it's a game.
How cool. Anytime that you can gamify, what is in essence a chore that is irritating is only going to improve the process, right? So good for you for making it fun for yourself. And, the idea of creating you're creating artificial hurry up and get it done and see how fast I can do it. That gives you a little, incentive to get in motion too. And what a great idea. That's a good job. I like it.
M reports, I gathered a couple classes of like items. Now I can see that there is too much in each category. So that will inspire me to thin the herd.
Right? You can go in and thin now. That's excellent. And sometimes we talked about this as we were talking about the Marie Kondo stuff, the idea that, in essence, she's saying pull the whole collection out of the whole house and get all your clothes out of the closet or all the closets and pull them out and sort them. And so if you have to do this in stages where you deal with all of the stuff in that drawer, you do all the stuff in that closet, and then you go do the other closet and merge them together and make new choices. You have to do, if you have to do that kind of collecting and purging in stages over time to make it manageable, it still works. So good on you. And I hope you can get rid of some stuff and make it fit better.
Nicolette, who's with us on Facebook, said that you sound louder than I do. So I've tweaked mine just a little bit. I hope that's in better balance.
Okay.
Please, anybody who is paying attention, let us know if we sound okay at the moment. Diane, also on Facebook, said, I have to tear out a perennial bed due to a failing retaining wall. So I've been giving away extra plants like mad. Feels good.
Oh, that's nice. And
garden decluttering.
It's a good time of year to do that. And I'm sure that people appreciate getting plants for free. So that's nice. Good job.
Okay, let's get on to our main topic.
Okay.
If you've been looking forward to summer as your chance to relax, spend time with kids, or take a vacation, this is the perfect time to declutter spaces dedicated to creative and recreational activities. So today, Gayle is going to share some strategies for organizing creative and play spaces to get the most fun and relaxation from your hobby, art, or craft.
I don't know about you, but avoiding the summer heat by spending time with your hobbies and crafts indoors seems like the perfect plan for me right now. Any activity in the air conditioning works. So stay inside and work on clearing up space you've dedicated to your favorite hobbies. I've got some suggestions on how to work on the space where you play and how to filter the content so you don't store more stuff that you don't use. So first, let's talk about the space you've dedicated to your hobby so far. We tend to cobble together storage as we start to acquire supplies that go with something that's gathered our interest. As we add supplies and equipment, we add another cabinet here or a box there. Sometimes it's a bookshelf, sometimes it's a file cabinet, but we add those pieces slowly over time. We're always playing catch up on the storage and the usage space, the work surface space, I mean. So I'm suggesting a shift in planning here. Once you decide that you've done this hobby enough that you love it and you'll be exploring it for a while, then plan a storage space and a work surface space with expansion in mind. Make space now to store a much bigger volume of supplies. Prepare a table workspace for equipment that is coming down the pike later. You're going to buy more stuff. So imagine your hobby space 2 years from now or 5 years from now. What does your friend's studio look like? That friend that's been doing this particular hobby for the last 10 years. Plan your space with the capacity to expand and to store those purchases that are going to come for the next few years. It'll make your life so much easier in the long run if you prepare for that inevitability up front instead of trying to engineer the storage space and the workspace always on the catch-up mode of, okay, now I bought a new piece of equipment and how am I going to make that fit? So plan for that expansion now. Next, we want to remind you of the sunk cost fallacy. The idea that what you spend on an item when you first bought it continues to be the value in the future. And so you make decisions about keeping that item based on that belief that it's still holding its value. It's a special problem in the craft hobby area because you buy things all the time for top dollar that draws your attention in the moment, whatever's new or trendy. And those craft and hobby stores are working super hard to get you to buy the latest and greatest because that's how they keep their businesses alive. So after you've been doing it for a while, you're going to be drowning in supplies that you likely won't ever use, but you feel bad about letting them go because of the money that you spent. That money's definitely gone. You can't recover its value now. And if you have supplies that are not your preference, it's better to pass them to someone who will use them rather than worry about the money lost. I think it's better to think of the cost as having been spent on a gift for someone else and pass things on to another person than worry about, I spent this money and I'm never going to use this supply, or I tried the supply and I hated it, or I don't like this color, or I had a momentary brain, hiccup and bought 15 of something and I really am only going to ever use 3 really in the process. And so I'm overstocked. And think about that money that's spent as you can't use it, you can't really recoup it, but you can pass that cost as a gift on to someone else. And maybe that'll let you let go of some of it. I think the ultimate goal here is don't keep a whole bunch of extra supplies that you're not going to use, or you're not likely to use them in the volume that you own because of the money that you spent. Some people think of it, they change their thought processes in that they imagine that the money they spent buying the item was entertainment. It was shopping entertainment. And so they spent the money in order to have the fun shopping. And that's how they, it's like going to the movie theater, right? You spend the money, you buy the ticket, you watch the movie, and you have spent that money for your entertainment. So for a lot of us, buying hobby supplies is the secondary hobby. And so if you are spending money to be entertained by the shopping for the supplies, then, you got some fun out of it. And maybe it's okay to just let that object go on if it's not actually something you're going to be used. And I have been in, I have to say, I have been in those shopping frenzies where, I'm standing in a room full of beads and I just lose my damn mind. And I grab 47,000 times more beads than I actually need to bring home with me. And then I do my best on the back end now to go, really don't need that, really don't need that. But, if you love the topic and you think the supply is fun, you're going to buy more than you should on a regular basis. And so maybe it's something that you can think of as one aspect of the hobby is entertaining yourself with the shopping. And aside from all of the conversations we've had about controlling and moderating your adding to the pile on the front end, that's a different show. But in this moment, recognizing that some of that money that you spend on supplies that you then ultimately don't end up using or liking can be money that you spent to entertain yourself shopping, and you can pass it on and not feel bad about it because you did get that value out of the money you spent. So now let's talk about the stages of skill that you acquire over time. As your skill grows, your desire for better and better quality supplies and equipment grows. The supplies and equipment you learn with quickly get outstripped by costlier and fancier things. You get equipment that is more specialized. They come up with ways to entice you to spend more money by making fancier equipment, fancier supplies. So the best thing you can do for your hobby and craft space is to clear out stuff that you've outgrown. We have a hard time giving up supplies, but this is an area that's a little bit easier to surrender, actually. Think of it as supporting someone who is just learning now what you learned 5 years ago, and put those supplies back into the river of stuff for them. As you learn a craft, as you start hanging out, doing a hobby, collecting something, you will buy with your limited amount of skill. And as you take classes and watch videos and look at instructions and buy magazines, and you learn techniques and you get better and better, those supplies that you bought in the beginning with your beginner's point of view will become less and less appealing to you. And so recognizing that you've got a collection of things that you would never go back to use, that you used to learn, and you can release those things to make space for the more expensive things that you're buying, the costlier things that you're buying, the equipment that you're using now, because your skill has so vastly improved that you have a whole lot more at your fingertips, and you can let the other stuff go.
On that note, Deborah said, the trick to craft clutter is to teach others your craft, then sell them your supplies.
There you go. I like it. Become a teacher, send it on, right? And, YouTube and Facebook and create an environment where you can sell supplies individually yourself really easily if you are in contact with groups of people that are like-minded about your particular hobby. So maybe you can make some money about it, but then you have created a third hobby, which is selling the supplies. So you have to decide how much you want to do that. But I like the idea of, come on down, little girl, let me teach you to crochet. And then here's all the stuff that you need to get started. And, what a lovely way to pass the obsession on and create your own crafting circle by teaching people what you love and helping them get started. We all try lots of activities over our lifetime, and we try some things that are trendy in the moment, and we find out we don't love them after all. Trying new things is the fun part, and sometimes we try it and find out we don't love it. I tried a beading project using porcupine quills, and they were color dyed. And when I finished that project, because I had spent money for the kit and I had paid to be in the class, so I finished the project where these supplies were introduced, I will never use them again. I hated working with them so much. You had to take the quill, you had to soak it in water, you had to flatten it out with a tool, you had to stitch it down to the fabric, tack it down, take it to the next place, bend it over, take it back, tack it down, bend it over, tack it down. I mean, it was just the most annoying thing to me, and I will never do it again. So I had the great experience with this teacher, and she was trying to pass on, a Native American tradition of crafting with quills. And so it was great to be introduced to it. It was great to see the process, and I will never do it again. So as soon as I finished that project, I had other friends with me who completely loved it. They thought it was fabulous. They could totally see themselves doing it again. And so all of the extra supplies that I had, I immediately handed them off to my other friends, because I was like, no way in hell am I ever doing this again. Get it away from me. And so I'm sure there are supplies and equipment in your hobby and craft areas where you've tried things on for size and you didn't like the process. You tried the technique, you tried the tool, you tried the supply, and you tried the process and you hated it. And so this is another great category of things to remove from your hobby space. It isn't a fail. Like, crafting is all about having fun and being challenged and being entertained. And so if you tried something on for size and had a good time while you were doing it and decided that you hated it and you don't want to do it again, that's okay. You still had the experience with that particular supply or craft or technique or tool, and you can call it a lesson learned, experience gained, and you can send send those pieces down the river of stuff to the next person who thought it was a great idea or who is interested in giving it a try like you did. I'm always surprised as I sit with my groups of friends, which ones we all try something together, and half of us think it's the bomb and half of us want to kill ourselves rather than keep doing it. And I can never predict who's going to like what and how it's going to go. It's part of the process of being working on a hobby that is skill driven and entertainment and learning new technique. And so I'm sure there's things that you can let go of that you tried and you didn't like. And it's a good way to make space in the studio for the things that you are doing that you do love, right? Lastly, let's discuss adjusting your hobby supplies and equipment for your current physical ability. Maybe your eyes can't stitch really small beads anymore. Maybe manipulating and mixing Fimo clay with your hands is too hard on your hands. That's something where you have to really it's like kneading dough, only harder and pushing on clay. Maybe you're a potter and you used to throw pots on a wheel, but you have to really be strong and manipulate that clay with your hands. And if it's gotten too hard for you, then it's not really a hobby that works for you anymore. I had a client who had to sell her lamp working stuff because it was too hard for her to sit on the stool and hold the rods and be rotating the rod back and forth for the length of time necessary to complete making a lampwork bead. It just got too hard for her to sit there and roll this thing in the fire and have a rod of glass in her hand. So she had both of her hands up, and this one's moving constantly, and this one's trying to do things with the glass. And it was too much for her to physically to continue to do that. And so there came a point where she was like, okay, I've always loved to do this, but it's too physically demanding now. And so she sold the whole kit and caboodle onto somebody else. When you know you can't manage to do something anymore, you can either figure out how to adapt it Like if somebody can't use really tiny beads anymore, maybe they can shift to using larger beads. They make 15 beads that are little, like tiny things with tiny holes. But there's also size 8 and size 6 beads that are much bigger and have much bigger holes. So sometimes you can adapt your craft to go with where your physical abilities are failing. But if you can't adapt to it anymore and you can't alter the supplies to continue to let you do it, then it's time for the supplies or the hobby to pass on to the next person. So you want to ask yourself, I've been doing crochet for 25 years and my hands are arthritic and it's really hard to work with the little tiny needles. Do I want to work with the big fat ones and use big fat yarn and make big fat crochet things? Or do I not like that? Is that not fun for me? Or have I gotten so stiff that it's any amount of holding needles is too difficult? And filter your hobby collection for what you can't manipulate anymore. We all, we change grow over time. Things that we found fascinating for a decade stop being fascinating, or we get bored, or, we had our 15 years of doing crocheting and now we're done with that one and we're on to something else. And so if you have to acknowledge that your physical capacity is being compromised at some point, then going and collecting those supplies and sending them on to somebody else who is still doing them would be a lovely gift to give someone who can't afford it or doesn't have as big of a supply as you've always had, or anybody that would be interested in learning. It'd be a great way to send the things on to the next person, to pass the craft down to the next person. Like Deborah said, you can teach somebody to do stuff and then let them have your supplies if that's what you need to do to step out. It's worth the effort to get things out of your house that are mocking you because you're not comfortable working with them anymore. And why not release them to the wider crafty world? Let somebody else play with the supplies. Okay, those are my suggestions for today. And I'm wondering who is working with clearing a craft and hobby area and what kind of challenges you're having about it.
I'm going to read you several related comments and get your feedback.
Okay.
Anya says, I am a charm quark, easily distracted and loving variety. So not one hobby, but several for me.
Right.
And she followed up that to say, I like giving myself permission to change hobbies in a kind of phases. I'll keep a variety of craft supplies I genuinely like: watercolor, piano, knitting, sewing. And then in a related comment, Susie said, my sister does wire wrapping, lapidary, knitting, and crocheting. Over the years, she has had various different hobbies that she's worked on: fabric painting, quilting, making picture frames, cross stitch, and needlepoint. Oh, she was also in 2 groups that grew plants. And we have a mutual friend who never met a textile art she didn't like.
She didn't love.
Yeah. So what, or at least wasn't willing to shell out hundreds
Money
or
to
thousands
try,
of dollars
right?
worth of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what special advice for people who maintain several hobbies, crafts, or art forms at once?
Right. Who are serial hobbyists. I think that, there's a certain kind of crafty person who just enjoys the experience of playing with artistic and crafty things and will try everything and enjoy everything and finds them all super entertaining. And so it sort of compounds your challenge because you have to have a polygamous hobbyist. That's a good name for it, Samudra. That exactly. And there are lots of people out there like that. And if you have multiple techniques that you find interesting, multiple things that you pursue, then you have a unique workspace and storage challenge in that you need to organize those crafts by type and keep the supplies organized by type, and giving yourself the appropriate workspace for different things. Some of them can have the same kind of workspace, and some of them don't have the same kind of workspace. And so I remember somebody that did a lot of stamping and paper crafting, and she had a wet station and a dry station, because there were techniques that involved water and there were techniques that didn't. And so they did not cross-pollinate well. And so she had to have two different workspaces depending on which kind of paper technique she was doing. And so the trick for that is, A, you probably need more space. B, you probably need to be a little bit more ruthless about how much you keep for each. And C, I think it's important to recognize which ones you're more likely to do and which ones you're less likely to do. Sort of prioritize the storage in terms of which crafts or hobbies you are more likely to keep long-term and which ones are sort of secondary or tertiary. You know, I found that interesting, but I'm only going to do that once a year or once a decade or whatever, and reduce the supply collection to reflect the likelihood of how often you're going to do it. Lots more to say about that, but that's a good place to start anyway. Serial crafters, multiple disciplines, requires some very special organizing planning of your workspace.
M says, I cross-craft. What I used with one may easily be incorporated in another project.
That's good. And that means that you probably are doing crafts that are at least related genres. And so then it's a matter of separating your supplies for how you would use them instead of by the craft type. So here's a bunch of papers, and these papers are sorted into, you know, like items, and here's a bunch of embellishments and they're sorted, and here's a bunch of stamps. And if you would use that kind of stuff in more than one place, then just having a population like at the store, here's all the stamps I have, here's all the paper I have, to support whichever version you're going to do, would be the way to sort of strategize the room. And then make the workspace support the various versions that you do as well. You might have to divvy up the workspace a little bit.
Kara says, my sister-in-law has all the things for stamping. I have let go of my stamping stuff because it's not something I'm all about. I go to her house and stamp with her and give her some money for supplies, but I don't have to house all the things.
There you go. See,
that's a great idea. It's sort of a slightly subversive way to keep your stuff at someone else's house.
Right. I love it. And it is a great way to craft in community, right? Like, this is why people go and take classes and buy kits, so that the teacher provides them with everything they need to do something. And particularly when you're first learning something, if you go and take a class, then you are provided with the supplies in order to learn what you're going to learn there that day. And you don't have to have all the stuff already. It comes to you as part of the teaching process. But I like the idea of sort of creating community. And what a great excuse to get together with your friends. And here, I'll help you use your supplies. Let me throw some money to you instead of a store. And I love that. And, you know, you probably can't even remotely make a dent in her supply. She barely notices. And rubber stamps are reusable. So all you do is use the ink and then you wash it off, and she still got the stamp. So I love that plan. I think it's really great. Probably
a really great way to just try something out too, without having to make any investment in materials or a space to work.
Well, and if somebody's doing it already and you know that person and you ask them, they're going to be like, oh my God, come over here. I'll show you how fabulous it is.
Yeah. They'll look forward to having some company and somebody to share their ideas and skills with. Ginger says, I've quit buying crafting supplies, beads, findings, papers, stickers, adhesives, etc. I'm on a use it up journey.
Oh, good for you.
My supplies are organized in a closet. I craft at my kitchen table. I use a tray to contain my current project and the needed supplies.
And I think there's something creatively challenging, just like a cook that cooks with what's in the kitchen, instead of trying to go and I'm going to do this recipe and I go buy the supplies for it. this is your version of, I'm going to challenge myself creatively by, I have a bunch of supplies. I need to use what I have instead of trying to get the exact right thing to do this project. And some really creative and fun things happen when you adapt what you have to what you're trying to accomplish. You will end up with some really great results that way too. It's a lot of fun. Good for you.
I really appreciate that our commenters are sort of giving me comments in themes today. Connie says, learning languages as a hobby, have given away all French books, dictionaries, etc. And Diane said, I did cross stitch years ago, donated some items to my daughter, yay, donated books, patterns. So don't forget that as you are deciding, I can't do this anymore, or I don't want to do this anymore, also take a look through your bookshelves or wherever you store magazines and patterns and paperwork related to your hobbies or crafts.
Yes, you got to go to the reference library and pull out all the stuff related to the reference library that is related to that craft. So thank you for that reminder. That's a good one.
Diane, who's with us on Facebook, said, I have a craft loft where I have collected a lot of dried flowers and seed heads to make fall arrangements. I sold a few, but kept most of the supplies. Since they come from my yard, I'm soon going to have another season's worth to put in there. I guess it's time to thin the herd.
I'm guessing it's time to thin the herd. And, if you think about it, you can, if you know other people that do it, you can make little Ziploc baggies of collections of things that you have and hand them out to your friends. You can take them to an art teacher at a school. You can take them to a craft meeting, a hobby group that you're in, and pass things out. Or you can put them back out in the yard and let them decompose and bring in the fresh batch.
I had to do that last year. As I wandered around my new neighborhood, which is just beautiful Chattanooga neighborhood, I collected all sorts of fun stuff, seed pods and dry stuff and dead stuff and cones and crispy things. And I made a couple of fall wreaths, and it was a lot of fun that I will probably never do again. And so I had a hard moment once, I was done doing that and winter was coming on, when I said, yeah, you know what, if I ever do get inspired again, nature will make more. And
right. I can go find some more pine cones, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that reminds me of the bee story. My French client that had a bee, she found a dead little fuzzy bee body and she put it in a box, and I picked it up when I was helping her declutter and said, do you want to throw out the bee? And she just was so like, don't give up my bee, man. That was her prize little, I found it in nature and I need to do something with it supply. So there are little supplies that can just go back to the decomposition process, and nature will provide you another one another day. That's so funny.
Catherine says, appreciate the time and talent crafters spend on pieces. I have too many totes of those beautiful craft sale pieces and garage sale specials.
Uh-oh. Time to tote them back out again, it sounds like.
And Gina said, do every kind of craft, therefore everything could be used, and hard to not become a hoarder just to do the DIYs.
Yeah, I know. People that are creatively inspired, that are easily in touch with being creative, they find all supplies to have some use to somebody somewhere. And so I just try to appeal to your sense of, you don't want to be drowning in supplies. Yes, they could all be used for something, but you can help supply other artists by passing things on and not be the keeper of all artistic things or all crafty supplies in your house. Just think of your living space. It doesn't have to be 100% full of craft items.
Do you think this might be an area where giving yourself creating an expiration date might be a good idea? When you find that cute, fabulous thing that you plan to incorporate in a future artwork, just put a little sticker or tag with today's date. And then when the follow-up inspiration to turn it into a work of art hasn't happened within a couple of years, release it back into the wild.
artistic wild and let somebody else
Yeah.
pick it up. Yeah. I think that's a good idea. I mean, just because you saw the potential doesn't mean you're going to realize the potential of it. And if you hold on to it for a little while, if you're the steward of it for a while and it never comes to your creative top of the list and you never pick it up and try to do it, then maybe it's just time to go, okay, I recognize the potential here, but I'm not going to be the one that turns that potential into art. And I need to send it on so that some other artist can pick it up and execute it. And I have seen that happen time and time again, where stuff that has stayed in somebody's space, and as soon as they hand it off to someone else, the person is squealing and jumping up and down, and it is immediately made into something. And so you are just, if you're not going to do it and it's not super exciting to you and you've had it for a while, then you're just preventing it from becoming something. You're preventing that potential from being realized by stashing it in the corner of your room. So send it on down the river of stuff. Let another artist find it and do something with it and be thrilled with their result. That's my theory for you art people out there, you crafty chicks.
Marilyn says, knitting and crocheting are too difficult for my arthritic hands. And
I hear that a lot.
Besides, now that I'm living in North Carolina, who needs more scarves and hats? Also, latch hook work. Is it a waste of time to keep the tools for grandchildren who might like it in the future? I've gotten rid of most of the yarn.
So I guess it depends on how big the tool collection is. But the tools, depending on what they're made of, the tools are also sort of, they might be, the metal things might be rusting, the wood things might be deteriorating a little bit. It depends on what condition there is, I guess. You have a million crochet hooks or knitting needles, and they usually stay okay over time. But if there's plastic involved, the plastic's deteriorating. And so I would weigh the value of how easy would it be to replace these? Are these specialty items that they don't make anymore? Is it a piece of equipment that is unique or unusual that isn't likely to be easily found later? And weigh that against how much you want to store and keep. And so, keeping a starter set of, my grandkids might want to get into crocheting or knitting, and I want to give them my stuff so they have grandma's knitting needles or grandma's crochet hooks or whatever. Creating a starter set for them. How cool. Like, make a little box, call it the crochet starter kit, and put their names on it, and you can hold on to it for a little while and see if they get into it. If you ask them, I mean, we all know whether they're going to be crafty or not. That crafty instinct sort of shows up early most of the time. And so if you think that here's a little kid that is into running outside and playing sports and not interested in learning to be crafty at all, then maybe you can send that stuff on. But if you think that some of the kids have that sort of, they've inherited that crafty gene from you, and they might show an interest in the future, then yeah, I say keep a starter set. Just don't go overboard. Don't go crazy. Don't keep, like, nobody that's just learning is going to want to receive 150 crocheted knitting needles all at once. So create a space, a starter set that is reasonable to work with, and let them go forward from there.
Okay, this question's very specific, but I thought you might have some ideas.
Okay.
Anne says, need to build shelves to hold yarn. Should they be attached to the wall or attached to something in front of the wall to protect for resale of house in the future? And her follow-up to that was, I have 9 boxes of yarn, vision of cubbyhole shelves. It will be very wide.
Okay.
Any thoughts on that? I mean, pros and cons of something more locked in place or something freestanding?
Yeah. So I think part of it is the surface that the thing is sitting on. So if it's on tile or wood floor instead of carpet, where it's a more uneven surface, that might make a difference. And yarn is typically not heavy, but an entire bookshelf full of it might indeed be heavy. And so you can strap it to the wall, attach it to the wall. And if you just do that on two sides, one on each side, you're not going to create a huge bunch of damage to the wall. It's not going to be a big deal. It's just like a picture hanger hole on the wall. You fill in the hole, you cover it up, you paint it, and you're done. So you won't be destroying your wall by attaching it. You're just going to sort of create a big screw attachment that holds it in place. So I wouldn't worry too much about that, because it's an easy repair to fix once you take the thing off the wall. And then if it's going to be big, tall, and it's going to be full of a bunch of yarn, it's going to have some weight to it. Not the least of which is the cubbies that you're going to create is going to add weight to the bookshelf. So I would err on the side of attaching it to the wall. And again, on carpet, because the thing would be more tilty and wobbly on a carpet versus on a tile or wood surface where it's in theory going to be more flat. But you have to judge, is it thick carpet with a huge cushion under it, or is it really thin carpet that you put the bookcase on and it goes completely flat like it's tile? So judge your floor surface. But if you're going to completely fill it up, then why not strap it to the wall? It won't make that much of a repair for you to fix when you move out.
Okay, here's a question that I know is more directed at me than at you.
Okay.
Marcia says, I need to pick up the love of cooking for a hobby. Any tips?
Okay, that's definitely you, brother man.
Well, and my tip on that is if you are here's Gayle's cooking expertise on display.
I tried to slice off the end of my finger.
My tip is if you want to become more of a cook and you are also a reader, there are some really terrific books that might inspire you somewhat. Almost anything by James Beard, because James Beard, besides being an incredible, writing incredible recipes, was a really talented writer, and his stuff is extremely accessible. And then I'm trying to remember who wrote A Year. I think there's one called A Year in Provence. Let's see. I can't remember that. Peter Mayle, M-A-Y-L-E. I don't think that was, except that I may be confusing that with something else. I'm not sure that was the one that had a lot of stuff about the food and the cooking. But, what I always look for is the more narrative cookbooks where people talk about, there's some recipes interspersed with a narrative about the context, the culture, the lifestyle, how the person enjoys food and cooking. That's how I would cultivate a love of cooking. But the truth is, my love of cooking was cultivated at my dad's side.
Right,
take over
at the knee of your dad.
That would be a bit of advice too, is find someone else in your life who is a talented and enthusiastic cook and shadow them for a while, because it might rub off.
Go and hang out with them. Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea, because there's something about watching someone and talking to them as they work on it, watching them do cooking, that makes it interesting and fun, and that they're working along and happy to let you work along beside them. That would be great.
They will use you as a sous chef.
Yes.
They will assign you the more simple and tedious things to do, like wash all of this for me and take this and cut it into teeny tiny pieces.
Right. But it will be part of the process of learning how they find it enthusiastic. And so I love that idea of just shadowing somebody that already loves it. It's good advice.
Well, and our dear friend Julie, who also loved to cook, we cultivated each other's love of cooking by doing it together. We would set aside 6 hours on a weekend day and tackle a recipe that was too difficult for either one of us to do alone, or just maybe too tedious to do alone. The things that have 16 herbs and spices to be measured or washed or minced
or chopped or whatever. Yeah.
And then Gayle was our scullery maid.
Oh my God.
Washing the dishes.
I washed the dishes and I got to sample the product. It was so awesome on those cooking days, because there would just be laid out on the table this array of stuff that they had made come out of the oven. And it was so awesome. I miss those party days a lot. That was a lot of fun.
Gina says, I use stock paper boxes to limit my supplies per craft category. One box for paper crafts, one box for sewing materials, one box for yarn for crochet, etc.
That's great discipline. I don't know that many crafty people that could do that, one box per. That's really dedicated and disciplined.
A tip from Kara, specifically to Anne, who asked about, shells for the yarn. Kara said, have you seen Ravelry? You can take photos of your yarn and list inventory and say where it's stored. That might be an option so you don't have to have it all visual. Some of my stash is in airtight containers in the garage.
Oh,
Ravelry,
okay.
Ravelry.
There you go. A yarn support app. Because, when you're sick of buying supplies, you can start buying tech related to your craft.
Right.
That's awesome. I haven't heard of that one.
M said, I have antique patterns for crocheted clothing and lace from my grandmother. Maybe a museum would want them.
That's a possibility. And you could also check out other fabric art guilds, quilt guilds, people that are into making crafty art garments, that kind of stuff. You might pass that stuff along to people that would be using in projects as well. And we have a hand up, Ed.
We do. Pat in Michigan. Go ahead, Pat.
For the yarn, I don't use it for yarn, but IKEA has a great cubby unit, like bookshelves, and it's already cubbies, and those cubbies fit banker's boxes.
Oh.
So to put, different yarns in banker boxes in the cubbies, if you don't want to see the yarn or if you don't want to see whatever it is that's in there, they're a great storage unit.
Okay. Yeah, and so you put them in the banker's box and put the lid on it and then put the lid in the cubby hole.
In the cubby, right.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
okay.
That's everything in, I think IKEA may have, well, there's the Billy series, everything they call Billy has a standard size. It may be like 12-inch square.
Yeah.
Maybe bigger than that, 14. I'm not sure, but a standard size. And IKEA also sells lots of things that fit in those cubby holes.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's a good solution. Faith said a few sessions back, Gayle mentioned that if you were keeping notes or workbooks from previous training, you are creating a reference library, which I see now as a separate hobby, but do not have the space for all of it now.
Yeah. So maybe it's time to thin that out as well. And it's one of the sub collections of every hobby is all of the training material and the learning material you gather along the way. And so this is a good one where you can go through and say, yeah, I know that I collected 9 million magazines, but maybe I only need to keep 4 million of them. Now I can let some of them go.
A follow-up comment from Anne about the yarn. She says, right now it is all in storage I'm paying monthly for. I would not put anything in my garage. It gets too hot.
Okay.
So she needs it on site and to stop paying for that storage.
Right. And get it back in the house. Well, get on it, sister. And make sure that you filter the yarn before you put it in for stuff that you wouldn't use, colors you don't like, textures that don't appeal to you anymore. I know that if you have a bunch of yarn in storage, that means you've been collecting for some time. And I'm sure that population has yarn in it that you've long since forgotten that you have. And when you go to pull it out, you'll be like, I would never use this because of what it's made out of, because of the color, because of how it feels, whatever. So make sure as you're reinstalling that yarn wall in your house that you take the opportunity to filter the stuff that needs to move on to the next person.
Really nice comment from Linda, who we've spoken to a couple of times. She had a house fire that she's been recovering from. And Linda said, I'm realizing 2 months post house fire that this is a whole life mindset. I'm building a shed from the materials I had squirreled away over 30 years. Also, as I start to think about what my new space might look like, I'm inspired to design spaces that will allow me to use and store spaces designed to be multi-purpose.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, you sort of been given the ultimate reset button. Just like when people were decluttered by Harvey and the floodwaters carried their stuff down the road, you have been reset by the fire. And so you're in the position where you are now at the front of the planning process instead of trying to catch up your space to accommodate your supplies like I talked about earlier today. So you've had the experience of having a big collection, even though you've lost some of it. And now you can plan the space with future workspace in mind. And you know what kinds of things that you want to be able to do. You know what kind of spaces you need to be able to have because of your familiarity with the craft already. So how cool that you get to plan it from the beginning. It's silver lining for a very traumatic event. So I hope that you get to lean into the fun of that part of the process, and it will make it a little bit more, it'll help you to recover and feel better about it on the back end. No one likes to lose things to fire.
Connie said, my aunt passed away and gave me some half-finished crochet doilies that I have no idea how to finish, and no one else wants to take them on, no pattern included. And one of the suggestions, M said, a half-finished doily might work as an inset on a dress or in a collage.
Yeah,
Alternately, maybe the Historical Society needs them for a display.
But it's a perfect kind of thing that it may not be in its ultimate finished state, but somebody could use that as a craft supply in some other project. And so
in a mixed media piece.
Yeah. Stitch it into something. So don't worry about it. You can just donate it on to some kind of a creative reuse center, or your friends who are crafty, or, Ziploc them up and pass them on to somebody. Take them to a quilt guild, take them to an art teacher, and let them add it into their collection of ephemera, because it's sort of the fact that it's uncompleted kind of makes it ephemera for other projects. So some artists will use it exactly as much as it's gotten done. They'll go and incorporate it into something. No doubt about it.
Penny shared, if you find a museum or organization dedicated to those crafts, they just might be happy to have them. I was able to do this with some vintage bead books. And Houston is fortunate to have the Houston, what is it called? Houston Center for Contemporary Craft.
Oh, yeah. That's exactly it.
So look for a craft museum or facility in your area. We are running out of time. So
Tittle.
let us talk. Let me talk about next week.
Okay.
We got such an overwhelmingly enthusiastic response to the somewhat adjusted format of our Marie Kondo episodes that we're going to do some more surveys, not as extensive as the one we did for Marie Kondo, but just to get a little more viewer and listener input as we're developing new topics or revisiting old topics. So next week, we're going to do that. I'm going to you'll watch your email. If you're on our mailing list, you'll get an email with a link to another survey, a shorter one this time, and we're going to talk about kitchens. In most homes, the kitchen is a center of activity, but all that traffic can lead to confusion and disagreement about how it should be used and what belongs in this critical space. In our next episode, we'll examine the problem of kitchen clutter and suggest strategies for streamlining the heart of your home. Join us next week, Tuesday, July 12th at noon US Central Time, live in Zoom and streaming on Facebook for Recipe for Success. Organize your kitchen for food, family, and fun. And watch your email for the link to the survey. If you're not on our mailing list, we'll listen to our announcements and we'll remind you how to subscribe. Let's talk about the Tittle.
Okay, so this week's Tittle is fun space inventory. This week's assignment is to take a critical look at the materials you keep for hobbies, arts, or crafts. Examine your workspace or your storage area that you dedicate to recreational activities and ask yourself a few tough questions. Are there any items I'm keeping solely because of how much money I spent on them? Are there basic materials that I bought when I was starting out that I no longer use because my skills have improved or my tastes have changed? Am I keeping any aspirational clutter in this area? In other words, items for activities I only thought I might be good at or that thought I might enjoy. Are there supplies I'm keeping, even though my physical limitations like impaired vision or hearing, loss of mobility, arthritis, etc., no longer permit me to use them? You're going in search of things in your craft room, hobby room that fulfill, that you can answer yes to these questions, and with the goal of isolating them and letting them move along to the next artist, to the next crafter, the next hobbyist,
free.
Setting them free. So ask yourself these questions and find the ones that you can answer the questions about them, and package them up and send them on. And then come back next week and tell us how it went.
If you're watching this on YouTube, we would love for you to join us live. To get notifications about upcoming events, we invite you to join the meetup group by visiting cfhou.com/meetup. You can also follow us on Facebook by visiting cfhou.com/Facebook. And for that mailing list I mentioned that you might want to be on, subscribe to our mailing list by visiting cfhou.com/subscribe.
Awesome.
We love to hear from you, so please keep those questions, comments, and topic suggestions coming on YouTube, Facebook, or anywhere else that you encounter us. And you can always reach us through our website at clutterfairyhouston.com.
Thank you so much for joining us. We had a great time talking about crafting today, and we will wait with bated breath to hear how your clear out of your craft supplies went next week. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.